Well, hello everybody, and welcome to episode 16 of Hearing Him First, and part 5, the final installment of our What's True About You series. We've been looking at this all week, just kind of looking at the idea that there are some power narratives, some statements that are true about each and every one of us as God's children that we can be reminded of. And so I thought this would be a good format for us to look at. I preached a sermon series on this subject about a year and a half ago, almost 2 years ago. It was in July of 2018. And it was titled, What's True About You? And so as I was thinking about content for Hearing Him First, which is really just a collection of short videos that remind us to hear God first and to hear His voice above all others, I thought that this might be a good format for us. So we've been looking at this all week, looking at this idea that we have to remind ourselves of what's true about us and to learn to see ourselves the way that God sees us, because James Bryan Smith makes a really good point in his series of books called The Good and Beautiful God, Good and Beautiful Life, Good and Beautiful Community, that all sin is really a failure to see as God sees. And so when we have a faulty view of God, a faulty view of ourselves, or a faulty view of others, that will cause us to act in ways that go against God's will. And these power narratives, or these affirmations that we've been focused on, have been crafted to remind me in my personal walk who God says I am and what is true about me. And so just to recap, so far we've looked at who you are, where you are, who's with you, and what you are. And who you are a beloved child of Christ. A beloved child of God in whom Christ dwells. And you are safe and secure in the strong and unshakable kingdom of heaven, which is never in trouble. You are never alone, and you are never lost, because Jesus is always with you, and He is never lost. And finally, yesterday we looked at this last affirmation: you are enough because God says you are enough. In fact, you were created in and for a loving relationship with God, and you have nothing to prove to anyone for any reason at any time. So there's a summary that you can request. You can use the comments below if you're watching this on Facebook or YouTube. You can also send an email to hearinghimfirst@gmail.com, and I'll be happy to send that to you or get that to you in some way. But I wanted to sort of challenge you as we wrap up this week with a fifth one that I have added to this group of four for myself just in the last few months. I was listening to an interview where Louis Giglio, who's a pastor in Atlanta, Passion City Church is his ministry's name, and he said that his core identity, somebody asked him what it was, he said it's a worshiper of God. That really stood out to me and struck me, and the way he explained it was, yes, I have many different roles in my life. I'm a father, I'm a pastor, I'm a husband, but the only role in my life that is permanent and eternal is worshiper of God. That we will worship God forever, those of us who are in Christ. And so I want to maybe encourage you to add that to the list. If you are a believer in Jesus Christ, if you are a worshiper of God now, to consider that all your other roles are temporary in contrast to that primary role of a worshiper of God. And then I want to challenge you to do something else. As we close out this series, I want to challenge you to write these affirmations out and to do that on a regular basis. You see, if we've spent most of our lives, or a good portion of our lives, believing something that is not true about ourselves, it's going to take a while to reformat that hard drive. It's going to take a while to believe and really start to believe at the core of who we are, those things that God says is true about us. So I want to encourage you to get in the habit of journaling. This has probably been one of the few things that has impacted my life more than any other. And what I want to challenge you to do is to take these 4 or 5 affirmations. Maybe you want to add 1 or 2 that has worked for you, or that God will lay on your heart. And I want you to write them out every day for a week. And then I want you to write them out every week for a year. And after that, I want you to write them out every month for the rest of your life. And to take the time to sit down with a piece of paper and a pencil and write these things out, or a piece of paper and a pen, and write these things out, and watch what God does as you slow down and chew on these statements and chew on the truth of these statements. And so if you need that resource that I've talked about, the quick guide, just request that. It's got them all there. It's got all the scriptures, and it's even got some questions for personal reflection or group discussion. So if you want to spend some time with this and maybe get a small group together and talk through some of these, I think that would be a fantastic use of your time. So I hope you've enjoyed this series. I hope that you will share it with somebody else if you have. And you can find the playlist on YouTube, all 5 put together in sequence. It's episodes 12 through 16. And you can share that playlist, or you can watch that playlist again to kind of recap and review. And the last thing that I'll leave with you is a prayer that Paul prayed for a church that he planted in Ephesus. And you can find this prayer in Ephesians chapter 3, verses 16 through 19. He says, I pray that out of his glorious riches he may strengthen you with the power through his Spirit in your inner being, so that Christ may dwell in your hearts through faith. And I pray that you, being rooted and established in love, may have power together with all the saints to grasp how wide and long and high and deep is the love of Christ. And to know that this love that surpasses knowledge, that you may be filled to the measure of all the fullness of God. So that's my prayer for you today, and always, that you would hear God first, that you would hear his voice above all others, and that you would be encouraged and strengthened for your walk. God bless you. I hope you'll take a minute to comment what maybe stood out to you the most from this series, or if you have another affirmation that you use on a regular basis, I would love for you to comment that below, and so we can share that together. And speaking of sharing, if you like this, share it with someone else. If you haven't already done so, go to YouTube, search Hearing Him First, and click subscribe so that you don't miss one of these. All those videos are listed there so that you can find the ones that you might have missed and catch up. God bless you. Have a great day and a great weekend.